Okay, guys, welcome to like doing this through online learning. I would encourage you to get a uh, something to write with and some paper and to take notes. I'll be sharing my notes with you, but I want you to make sure that you get all these notes for yourself as well while we're doing assignments and stuff. You'll have it there. You won't have to be going back and forth to my PowerPoint notes or my slides. So what we're about to talk about is the financial sector and the long run stabilization policies. This is our really kind of our final unit that's going to be on the AP test for this year. The financial sector is a huge thing this year, especially because we are going through this coronavirus scare that we are, and the economy is really kind of tanking at this point. And so we're doing a lot of things in the financial sector that have never been done before, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. All right, the first thing we're going to talk about is money and kind of all be on the same page as far as what money is and kind of define that. So we're kind of all on the same page about the different definitions and what money is and what money isn't. Okay, so what is money? Money is anything that is generally accepted for payment for goods and services. Okay, money is anything that is generally accepted for payment of goods and services. So money is not the same as wealth or income. Okay, wealth and income are two different things. If you were in my personal finance class, we kind of talked about this before, but wealth is the total collection of assets. So everything that you have and everything you own, while income is the flow of earnings per unit of time. Now, if you'll remember from talking before, income is always going to be on the demand side, while wages would always be on the supply side. Okay. All right. Now, there's two types of money that we need to know. Well, first one is commodity money. And this is money that performs the function of money and has intrinsic value. So gold is valuable in itself, right? But it also can be traded for goods. Okay, you don't, and it's another example that I always give is cigarettes in jail. Okay, that becomes a form of currency in jail. Cigarettes do, and many other things actually, but we'll go with that. But the commodity money is money that actually is valuable. You can do other things with gold. You can make a necklace, you can make a bracelet, you can make a ring. You could do other things. It has value in itself, but it also can be used to trade goods and services. The next type is fiat money, which is what our money is now. Our money is in our system. That dollar that you have, or that $20 bill that you have, is not valuable at all unless the government says it is. Okay, that's what we call fiat money. The fact that that money is demanded and that it is the government says that it can be used to buy things is the only thing that makes it worth anything. All right, now let's go on to the three functions of money. Okay, the three functions of money. The first one is a medium of exchange. Okay, these are the things that the money in our society functions as. And the first one is a medium of exchange, where money can be used to buy goods and services, no complications of the barter system. Okay, so the barter system, if you've never heard of that, that is where you trade goods for goods. So let's say that I make, I don't know, I teach. Okay, that would be a good example. I'm not going and knocking on your parents' door at night and saying, hey, I taught your kid all day. I need some food, or do you have a chicken I can have, or something of that nature. We don't do that anymore. Instead, we do where I teach, they give me money for that, and then I go and buy my goods and services from that. Okay. Now, the next function of money is a unit of account. This is the one the students typically have the most trouble understanding, but it's really just that we can use money to know how much things are worth, or their cost, how much we value those goods. So I've used the example here: one goat equals $50 and one chicken equals $10, right? So that would mean that we valued goats more than we value chickens. Okay, so like if you go to the store and you see, I don't know, a candy bar is worth they're charging $100 for a candy bar. You know that's not right. We use dollar values to know how much we value things. It's a measurement of how we value things. And then finally, a store of value. Okay, a store of value. Now, money allows you to store purchasing power for the future. This is one of the things that we don't want inflation for. If your money is not functioning as a store of value and it's inflating out of control, then you don't have it doesn't function as this function of money. And so we are able to put money away, and then hopefully it has enough purchasing power in the future added, along with interest. All right. So the three functions of money: a medium of exchange, a unit of account, and a store of value. Now, you might be saying, we talked about fiat money, and you might be thinking, what backs the money supply? Well, you said we no longer on the gold standard. So what is that? What is our money? Well, it's just basically an IOU from the government for all debts, public and private. Okay. So it's just basically you saying, hey, here's what I'm giving you. It's this dollar amount, and that's what we say is worth money, right? So what makes money effective? Three things. It has to be generally accepted. Okay, so buyers and sellers have confidence that it is legal tender. Okay, so when you're going to the store, you don't have to worry that they're not going to take your dollar. Okay, you don't have to worry of taking your dollar. It's generally accepted. Now, me and my wife went about 6 or 7 years ago, went to the Dominican Republic, and they typically didn't want their own currency. They wanted US dollars. And so they didn't have confidence in their money, but they did in the United States dollar. And so they wanted United States dollars rather than Dominican pesos, because the pesos weren't worth much, and they weren't accepted in a lot of places. Now, the second thing that makes our money effective is it being scarce. So money must not be easily reproduced. And then the other thing is that what makes money valuable, makes people want it, is that it is scarce. Now, and so this worried me a little bit when the Federal Reserve Chairman said the other day that, hey, the printing presses are ready. We're ready to print out all the money that we need. And so that would make it where our money was worth less because we're printing more of it. The next thing is portable and divisible. Money must be easily transported and divided. Now, imagine if our money was these huge rocks, and we just had to carry these rocks everywhere with us. Well, that would be very difficult. Now we typically carry money in a wallet. It's very thin, it's very small, pretty small, and we're able to do that. It also needs to be divisible. So that's the reason that we have a $1 bill, a $5 bill, a $10 bill, a $20 bill, so on and so forth, right? It needs to be divisible and be easily to make change and so on and so forth, okay? So that's kind of what backs our money supply. It's not backed by gold. It's not backed by anything else. In the past, it was backed by gold, where if you printed off an amount of money, so like you printed off $20, you had to have $20 in gold to back that up. It's no longer like that. Okay, so we need to look at how do we classify money. Okay, so we have two, well, there's probably more than this, but the two that you need to know is M1 and M2 money, okay, is how we classify money. So M1 money has the highest liquidity, and liquidity just means that it is easily to get and easy to spend, okay? It has the highest liquidity. It is going to be currency in circulation, so the dollars you may have in your wallet or in your purse or whatever. Banking deposits, checking accounts, that's going to be important coming up when we start talking about the banking system, but checking accounts. Make sure you know that it's not savings accounts, but checking accounts for the most part. And then traveler's checks, we really don't use that often anymore, but those are just basically checks that you could use on a trip that are basically just take money straight out of your bank account. Now, M2 money includes all of M1, okay? So currency and banking deposits and all that stuff. Let me go back up to M1 and talk about banking deposits. The reason that is considered high liquidity, most of your money out if you needed to, not all of it, which we'll talk about later. But that is the reason that would be M1. But M2 is all of M1 plus some of M and plus the following: savings deposits, so money market accounts, money that you deposit into a savings account, including money market accounts, time deposits, which are CDs, certificate of deposit. So to explain that, you're telling the bank, hey, I'm going to keep this money in the bank for a certain length of time, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, and they can use that money to make loans, and you are going to get that in 3 years. You can cash that in at a pretty good interest rate. And then money market funds, money that is put on, really kind of put in the stock market, and so forth. Those things are very difficult to get out, and you're going to pay a penalty for pulling those out of the bank. Now, M1 and M2 money often earn little to no interest, so the opportunity cost of holding liquid money is the interest you could be earning. So the longer you keep your money in the bank, the more interest it's going to earn. That if you pledge to keep your money in a bank for longer, you're going to earn more interest. And so the opportunity cost of having M1 especially is the fact that you're not earning any interest on it. That it's you hide your money under your bed, and it's probably not going to be worth a whole lot, or going to be worth a lot less in the future years. Okay, so now we need to look at the financial sector, and let's look at a few definitions here that we need to agree upon and understand when we're talking about the financial sector. Our first one is going to be what is the financial sector? And so this is a network of institutions, usually banks. It can be some other things as well, credit unions and such institutions that what these things do is they link borrowers and lenders, people that need to borrow money and people that want to lend money to make interest off of that money. So you go to, for instance, you go to the bank, you get a loan, and they are going to lend that money to you, but they're not going to usually give that money to you for free, not give you a zero interest rate. They're going to charge you interest because that's how banks make money. And I'll say this again later on, probably, but banks are not in the business of losing money. They're in the business of making money. Now, there's two things that assets and liabilities. So assets are going to be anything tangible and intangible that is owned. Okay, so any money you own, any property you own, any real estate you own, those type of things, that is going to be an asset. Those are things that you have. Liabilities are things that are owed. Okay, so that's a liability that it counts against you, or that subtracts against your wealth, I guess you could say. So for instance, we've paid my car off, the car that I drive, we paid that off. And so for us, that's an asset. Okay, that's something that we own. Okay, we've paid all the payments on that. And so I don't know how much of an asset it is. Not much. It's probably more of an asset to me than it is to anybody else. But we haven't paid off my wife's car. And so that is a liability. Okay, that's a liability that each month we have to pay the payment on, and kind of subtracts from our overall wealth. Now, a loan is an agreement between a lender and borrower. So if let's say you go to the bank, you get a loan, you're going to sign off on these papers that say, hey, I agree to, you're going to give me this money and I'm going to pay back this money at a interest rate. Okay. And the fee for getting a loan is what we call an interest rate. Okay. So if you look down at the very bottom here, it says a loan is an asset for a lender and a liability for a borrower. So if I give you a loan, that's an asset to me. Okay, it's an asset to me because I'm expecting that to get paid back. But for you, it's going to be a liability. Okay, so keep that in mind going forward on the financials, as we're talking about these different things. Okay, let's talk about stocks and bonds and what's the difference between a stock and bond. So let's look at the scenario here. Let's say you're starting a lemonade stand and you need some money to get started. So what are you going to do? There's several things you could do. One, you could ask your grandmother to loan you $100 Well, if that happens, there's a bond. That's a bond that's going to lend you $100. So bonds are IOUs. Okay. And normally bonds are sold by the government, but they also could be sold by businesses or even an individual, but they must repay the lender. And usually bonds have an interest rate attached to them. Okay. So, for instance, let's say that you're starting a business and you go, hey, Brookshire, I need some money. I'm starting a business. And I say, okay, yeah, that's great. I'll loan you $1,000, but you pay that back to me in a 2% interest rate. And so we would agree to that. You'd say, okay, I'll pay back in 2 years at a 2% interest rate. I'm like, oh, all right, cool. And so the key though with that is I don't own any of the company. I have no ownership in the company. I've just loaned you money. That's a bond holder. We're going to talk about bonds a lot more in our next lecture. And that would refer to government bonds that we're going to talk about. But just to get started here, thinking about bonds. Now, the next thing is to get more money. The other thing you could do is you could sell half your company and issue shares of stock. Okay, so let's say you're starting this lemonade stand and you're like, well, I don't really want to pay the money back. So what could you do? You could sell stock in your lemonade stand. Okay, and this is going to represent ownership. You're selling off little pieces of ownership of your business. Now, the only people that can sell stock are corporations. Now, most of the time, when you sell this off, that doesn't mean now that you get all the profit. It means that you are going to be entitled to give your stockholders a portion of your profit. Some of the advantages of stock, though, is that you don't have to pay back the money at an interest rate. Okay. All right. Let's look at bonds just a little bit more. So a bond is issued at a specific interest rate, which we talked about just a little bit, and that rate does not change throughout the life of the bond. So let's say that you get a 30-year U.S. Treasury bond. Okay, you buy it for $1,000, and it has a 5% interest rate. So that means in 30 years you'll get $50. Okay, so for giving the government $1,000 to use, 30 years from now you'll get $50. So really, you're not making that much, but you don't really make that much off of bonds normally. Okay. Now, if the interest rate, this is key. Now, all that I just told you, that's just how bonds work. This is the part that you really need to know. If the interest rate falls and new bonds are being issued at 3%, then people would rather have the old 5% bonds. Okay. And so that means that when interest rates decrease on bonds, the bond price increases. So that means you could sell the bond for more now. So let's say that buyers would want to bid up the price because they would be able to make more off of your bond than they would off of the 3% bond. So the point being, at the very bottom, this is the important thing. Bond price and interest rates are inversely related. Okay, so if the price, you could sell your bond on the open market for more if the interest rate decreases. Okay, if interest rates on bonds decrease, if interest rates on bonds increase, then you would have the bond price would decrease and you wouldn't be able to sell your bond on the open market probably for as much as you bought it for. So make sure you know that. That's very important. Star that, check that, underline it, highlight it, whatever you do, you need to know that bond price and interest rates are going to be inversely related. Okay. All right. So let's talk about the money market. When we talk about the money market, we're talking about supply and demand for money, dollars. Okay. So demand for money at any given time, people demand a certain amount of liquid assets, money, dollars, things you can spend. There's two different reasons they do this. First one, transaction demand for money. People hold money for everyday transactions. So since we've been kind of shut in and everything, and the only thing we can really get is going through the drive-through places or getting takeout. I try to go to Sonic at least 2 or 3 times a week just to get a Coke, just to get out of the house a little bit and drive around. So I keep money on hand and I'm, pay for my drink at Sonic, right? So that's my, but that's transaction demand. To pay for that, I'll keep money on hand. Now, the second thing is asset demand for money. People hold money since it's less risky than other assets. So stocks, let's say the company goes down, people have lost a lot of money in the stock market over the past few weeks with the stock market just totally tanking. People have lost a lot of money. And so if you put money under your bed, it may be a lot less risky than putting it on the stock market. With risk comes reward, but there's also that reason. So what's the opportunity cost of holding money? What's the opportunity cost of keeping money in your pocket or checking account? The interest rate you could be earning from other financial assets like stocks, bonds, and real estate. Okay. So the interest, if the opportunity cost of keeping money or holding that M1 money is the fact that you're not going to be able to earn any interest on that money. If you put it under your bed or you dig a hole in your backyard and put that money in the hole in your backyard, you're not going to earn any interest off that. Okay, so what happens to the quantity demand for money? Remember that quantity demanded. Anytime we see quantity demanded, that means the amount of money when interest rates increase. So quantity demanded falls because interest rates, people would prefer to have interest earning assets instead. Okay, so if interest rates increase, quantity demanded is going to fall because individuals would prefer to have stocks, bonds, real estate, something of that nature. Okay. Now, what happens to quantity demanded when interest rates decrease? Quantity demand increases. So there's an inverse relationship between quantity demanded of money and interest rates. Okay. So there is going to be no incentive to convert cash into interest earning assets if interest rates decrease. Okay. So again, there's an inverse relationship between the interest rate and the quantity of money demanded. Okay, make sure you know that, highlight that, circle it, star it, whatever. But make sure you know there's an inverse relationship between interest rates and quantity of money demanded. Now, we're going to need to show this on a graph, and that is our demand for money graph. Okay. On our y-axis, here we're going to have our nominal interest rate. So nominal interest rate means without inflation figured in. And then on our x-axis, quantity of money, okay? The quantity of money. And in this one, we're doing billions of dollars. But since there's an inverse relationship between interest rates and the quantity demanded of money, that means that it is going to be downward sloping. So the demand for money is downward sloping, okay? All right. Now, what happens if price levels increase? Then that means if price levels increase, then people are going to demand more money because if the price of money, if prices increase, then we're going to need more money, right? So the money demand is going to increase. So that's one of our shifters. Okay, there's three shifters of money demand. One is the change in price level. The second is change in income. The third is change in technology. Okay, change in technology. Okay, most of the time you'll see it as price level. Changes in price level is what's going to change money demand the most. All right, so let's talk about the supply of money. So who supplies the United States money? Well, the Federal Reserve does. The Federal Reserve System. You've probably heard the Fed in the past few days. The Fed is just a short name for the Federal Reserve System, and they're the ones that control the United States money supply, our dollars, right? So supply of money is upward sloping, not upward sloping, sorry, is vertical. Okay, is vertical because there is no relationship between the quantity of money and interest rate, or the supply of money and interest rates. The Federal Reserve sets that money supply. Okay, the Fed is a nonpartisan, which means there's no parties involved in the Federal Reserve, a government office, but they set up and adjust the money supply to adjust the economy. Okay, and there's several ways they do this. We'll talk more about that in our next lecture. But the Fed is, they're the ones that decide the money supply. Now, this decision on the money supply and whether they increase or decrease the money supply is what we call monetary policy. Okay. Now, the Federal Reserve. What is the Federal Reserve? It is, of course, a nonpartisan group, and they're there to regulate banks and to control the nation's money supply. All right. So, increasing the money supply. So if they increase the money supply, the Fed increases the money supply, a temporary surplus of money will occur at a 5% interest rate to fall to 2%. So if they increase the money supply, our interest rate is going to decrease. And I know my numbers aren't right over here on my y-axis, but let's just pretend they are, okay? The surplus will cause the interest rate to fall to 2%, okay? So if the Fed increases the money supply, then that means our interest rate will decrease, okay? And you can see it there on the graph. How does this affect aggregate demand? An increase in money supply decreases interest rates. If we decrease interest rates, we know that that is going to increase investment, okay? And investment, if we remember, investment is the increase of business spending. So businesses are going to spend more money, hopefully, if we have a decrease in the interest rate, and that will increase our aggregate demand, okay? So let's go over that one more time. An increase in the money supply. Money supply increases, that's what they're talking about now. In this time period that we're in now, where with the coronavirus and the economy really kind of tanking right now, as they're talking about increasing the money supply, printing more money, okay? And through doing that, that will decrease interest rates. If we have a decrease in interest rates, we should have an increase in investment and an increase in AD, okay? Now let's talk about decreasing the money supply. We decrease the money supply. That is going to cause if we look at our graph here, our interest rate was 5%, and when we decrease the money supply, the interest rate went to 10%. So we decrease the money supply, it's going to increase our interest rate. We can see that on our graph here. When we increase the interest rate, it decreases investment because businesses aren't going to be as likely to spend money, and that's going to cause a decrease in aggregate demand, okay? That again, decrease in money supply equals an increase in interest rate equals a decrease in investment and a decrease in aggregate demand. You will be tested on that. You need to know that, okay? All right, so let's look at fractional reserve banking, okay? So what fractional reserve banking means is when banks hold only a small portion of their deposits to cover withdrawals and then loan the rest of the money out. So let's say that you get paid, you're working a job and you get paid and you put $200 in the bank. Normally, they're only going to have to hold 10% of those dollars. Okay, so if you get paid $200, they're going to keep 20 of that at the bank, and the rest of that 180 that you keep in the bank, they're going to loan out. They're going to write out loans for that money. Okay, that's how banks make money, is on loans. So if they just hold your money at the bank, they're not making any money. So if we know, now that we know that, if we all went to the bank to withdraw money at the same time, what would happen? So if we all decided, hey, I'm going to go and get all my money out of the bank because I'm worried that the banking system's going to fail, we would have a bank run. And these happened during the Great Depression. It closed down banks. Banks would just run out of money. And once they ran out of money, they ended up having to close down because they couldn't afford it, couldn't afford to stay open. Okay, so let's look at our we're going to do bank balance sheets, and let's look at some of the vocabulary we're going to need to know for that. The first one is a demand deposit. So demand deposit is money that is deposited in a commercial bank in a checking account. Okay, so a demand deposit is your money that you put in the bank that they that is going in your checking account. This would count as an M1 type money. Now, required reserves, these are the percent of deposits that banks must hold by law. And it's usually around 10% or so. The percent of deposits the banks must hold by law. So if you put in a deposit of $100, they got to keep $10 of that. And that means that they can loan out 90 of those dollars, which would be your excess reserves, the amount the bank can loan out. Okay. The amount the bank can loan out. Okay. So the bank balance sheet is a record of a bank's assets, liabilities, and net worth. So would demand deposits be an asset or a liability? They are a liability for the bank because they owe that money to you. That's money you're giving them, and they owe that to you, but it's an asset for you. So the money that I have in the bank right now, as little as it may be, is an asset for me. Okay, so this is how a bank balance sheet looks. You'll have your demand deposits and liabilities, your loan, your reserves. So it's balanced because the totals must equal. Now you're going to have some that don't equal, but the totals usually need to equal. If the bank is holding no excess reserves, so they don't have any money that they can loan out, okay, how much is the required reserve ratio? Now, how do we figure this out? We figure this out because we look at the demand deposits, okay? So the demand deposits are 5,000. The reserves are 500. Okay, so we're assuming it says that they're not holding any excess reserves. So this reserves here is all the required reserves. Okay, so our required reserve ratio is going to be 10%. Okay, because of it's 5,000 of 500. Okay, so this shows all the assets of this, whatever bank this is has all the liabilities, and it equals. Okay. All right, we're going to do more with bank balance sheets during our office hours this week. And so I look forward to seeing you. Please write down any questions that you have and also bring those to our office hours. Thank you very much.